So I would figure out how we could do things as cheaply and inexpensively as possible, and so did Sandy Scott. We ran for 4 years. But when we closed down, there was a difference, as you said, in what talent was owed. And also, I'm not saying Rob Van Dam wasn't. Yeah, I think he went right to, or already heavy at that point. He wasn't like hurting financially, but didn't Paul owe him $100 and something thousand? Just Rob Van Dam. I believe he was the big one because he was signing these guys to six-figure contracts. And
when he had to, it's important to know, at a certain point, ECW had no choice because WCW and eventually WWE were signing up everybody, and Paul wanted to hang on to any talent. It's kind of like back in the 80s. He had to sign them to these big contracts, whether or not he could pay them or not.
And that's what I was going to bring up, and guys were signing them. Paul's obvious talents have always been as a performer and a manager and a booker. He gets the best out of what he's got to work with, and he's very creative and everything. But his biggest talent is a motivational speaker. How he was able to convince these guys that he was going to honor six-figure contracts. They were smoking the opium, as Joe Goff would say. They were in the category of, as we just talked about, the AEW fans who just didn't want to say, they wanted to believe it. I mean, when me and Bobby and Stan signed the contracts with Crockett for $225 grand a year apiece, we went out in the parking lot. I've said this and said, he can't pay this. But we've got some on paper, so we're going to get something. We're already making over $100 grand a year with those guys. In ECW, they had to see. But anyway, the point is, he owed talent. Candido had told me that this was the way that he got Candido and Tammy and
They can name it.
But he probably had a specialized story for each guy that he had put money in somewhere or another. But the guys wanted to help so bad that he nominated or appointed Candido and Tammy to be in charge of travel and made them like office assistants with some kind of verbal title. And they were putting the wrestlers' plane tickets and travel on their personal credit cards so they'd be reimbursed later. And it ended up that they had bought, they didn't buy a house that they really liked. But they had the, WWF run and made the money, and a couple years later they're doing this, and they ended up having to fucking move out of the house because they couldn't pay. Their credit went to shit because they couldn't pay for the plane tickets they charged for Paulie. Anyway, it's about wrestling when I closed down, all talent, collectively, every wrestler that I owed money to totaled a little bit less than $10,000. And I knew I could pay that off. And I did within, that was November. December, January, by February, when I had started in Connecticut, I had already sent checks and paid, guys off because it was a number. I didn't know anybody more than $1,000 individually, so it was a variety of, I cleaned that up first. And our biggest bills, and by the way, I still owe Mustafa $100 from a year before that, which, as I mentioned, because him and the Gangsters no-showed me. He didn't come to pick up his payoff for his last show he worked. Anyway, Paulie owed the production companies and the pay-per-view did the cable people, blah, blah, blah. As a matter of fact, Candido told me another story. He told me that for one of those pay-per-views, maybe the first one they did, but for one of the big ECW pay-per-views, that was back when they had the, they used to have the Barker Channel thing, remember? And they would show the 30-minute promotional video over and over and over. You know what I'm talking about, of course. He was supposed to produce the promotional video for like On Demand or whoever was operating the pay-per-view, and he kept blowing the deadlines. And finally, I don't know whether this is something he told Chris. Candido wouldn't have made it up. I don't know why he would have made this up to tell Candido, Paulie, contractually obligated fucking Parker Channel preview video of the pay-per-view that they were supposed to be running. But even if that's a made-up story, what the fuck is going on in that office? Because then I said, Chris, you can't be he said, well, Paul was doing promos and he was in the guy's basement. And, whoever they used to do the promos and the editing in the basement, he was down there for 36 hours doing TV and he wouldn't come up. They fined him 50 grand. I'm like, what the fuck is going on with these people? Whether they would get fined 50 grand or whether he'd let one of his boys think he just got fined 50 grand because he couldn't be bothered to send the deal in, whatever the fuck. The point is, on our production end, we dealt with one production company, the folks at Channel 3 down in Chattanooga, and Ron DiCiani, who was the head of that department, he later went on to Chicago, worked on the Montel Williams show.
No shit, right?
They have the master tapes of all the Smoky Mountain shows. And I told him, I said, I'm going up to Connecticut, I'll be working in the office there. You've got the tapes as collateral. I owe them, I'm going to say $20,000. And I said, I will be paying that off because I'm working on a couple things. Don't do anything with those tapes. Because that's what, again, the financials of wrestling from 25 years ago. What we're talking about now is Howard Brody was earnestly trying to get us an international television deal to buy the TV tapes, which in the 90s, international television companies in various countries around the world bought wrestling tapes from America. This is not a made-up thing. This was a big business. Howard Brody had Ring Warriors. They sold the New Japan tapes. He was partners with Hiro Matsuda. He sold them in Germany, and he sold the whole 9 yards. So it was, at that time, one of the ways that a wrestling promotion could get an income with very little expense was to get an international TV deal. And, I mean, the stories from the 80s especially, which is when it started, when everything blew up. The Savoldi tapes. Somebody in Brazil would pay $500 a week to send me a tape, whatever. You've seen those deals. So, Howard was working on getting us an international TSL, trying very earnestly, and if that had happened, if we could have had a guaranteed income like that of $10,000 or $15,000
statute of limitations.
A radio station in Knoxville, WIBK, the most expensive fucking goddamn commercials in radio history. It was a big country station in town, and their ratings dwarfed everything else, and it was like buying a car to get 60 seconds on fucking WIBK. The radio station, and a radio station in Johnson City, and possibly a few dollars to our old friends at Fox 43 that charged us like paid programming, even though we were their highest rated program every Sunday until Fox Network kicked in. And I think I might have owed them for 3 or 4 weeks at the end there, but it was less than 20 grand for all of those people who bent over backwards to take our money and give us also almost no help. So that's what we ended up owing. Nobody went to court. Nobody got fucking thrown out a window. And then in the every story ends with a happy ending. I got my money back when I sold the library to the network, well, actually before the network, to the WWE when they first started buying footage. And by the time I paid taxes on what they paid me, I ended up with my investment back. And I'll say one other thing before I open the floor up to questions. But you know, you'd mentioned earlier, it was my decision to shut it down because I talked to Ruben, and here was the arrangement. He never agreed to put any set amount of money in this thing. He said, I will get it started, I will fund it, get it up and running, and his basic instruction to me at the start of the thing was, as long as I am spending less and you are making more, we will continue in that direction. More like a much more politely worded and verbose statement, much like Only Made to Jarrett that summer of '83. It's a shits now. It can't get any worse. As long as it gets better, keep doing it. And that's what happened. He obviously, we started in 1992. He paid the startup costs, obviously, to shoot the original TVs and to make the deals, get things on the air, and get things running, and the initial equipment we need. And I still wish that we bought a brand new ring truck from the start, because we spent a lot of money in that area trying to save money. But then we didn't start running shows really full time until the summer of '92. So '92 was the start. '93 was much better because business started to pick up. People started to realize what was going on. With the Rock and Roll Express, we're back together. For a while there, I've mentioned this, we had more people buying tickets to see spot shows in little towns in Virginia, like Council, Virginia, and Hayside, and all those places. You'd have 1,000 people there to see the Rock and Roll Express, and wrestling's back on TV, and it was a big deal in small towns at first, but it took Knoxville and Johnson City a while. But then in '93, we got them to start coming. '94 was the best year we had financially and at the gate. Because everything was clicking, and the TVs had penetrated. We had sponsors now. People were starting to see what was going on, and we were doing, what was that? The '94 was the year Night of the Legends. So at that period of time in wrestling, we were the only promotion, I think it's fair to say, that was actually getting bigger instead of smaller. WCW from '92 to '94, their house shows ranged from bleak to embarrassing, right? It was brutal. At some points in our run, we drew more people in Knoxville than they were in the Omni in Atlanta. The WWF business was down. Remember, because of the steroid trials, obviously there were outside factors. But from '92 through '94, WWF live event business, and I believe TV ratings, had declined. Memphis, other end of the state, had been a territory, had been there for 50 years. I think that was the period of time that they actually left the Mid-South Coliseum and went to another smaller building for a while there. On the fairgrounds towns in Memphis. And then Randy Hale's booking, and especially with the USWA and Smoky Mountain feud, he got them back. But at that time, Louisville had become their, one of their biggest towns just because Memphis had fallen off. So, and I don't know what ECW was doing because that was the years Todd Gordon had formed it, and then Eddie Gilbert, and then Paul E. got brought in by Eddie, and then all that stuff. But I know it was a little early for them, but they weren't really making any noise. So, to defend Rick Rubin's status and qualities as a businessman, it wasn't like he was just pouring money down a well because he was, enjoyed the product. There was growth year over year obviously we weren't doing pay-per-view like WCW or WWF and the merchandising, whatever, but in the metrics that you could compare, live event attendance, broadcast TV ratings, we were the only company going up.
Hey there, problem solvers. Packing that entire workspace into that tiny bag will help you be productive anywhere.
Up. And it wasn't until 95, for a variety of reasons that we can discuss, talent changing, the whole business falling in a hole, the guys we had getting stale, the Rock and Roll Express were still there, but now it had been 2 years, 3 years. How do you replace the Rock and Roll Express? But what happens when they get used to the Rock and Roll Express? So 95 was the year that we went in the opposite direction. And we tried to cut costs and trim things down to where an extra $15,000 a month would have been the whole difference. But at that point, when Rick said, okay, you don't have to close, we don't have to close, because he still had infrastructure. Their company out in California paid for our insurance and a few other things. He said, you do what you want. As long as you can break even and make it work, we can do this indefinitely. But when the TV deal didn't come in, and it didn't look like we could break even, I didn't have the facility to put any more in it, and I wasn't going to owe people a bunch of money. And then Tracy Smothers even came. There's a woman in Eastern Kentucky. She'll give us $50,000. I'm like, great. Then I owe some woman in Eastern Kentucky $50,000 because now Vince is losing money. That's the other thing. In 1995 was the famous fucking year that he ripped all the goddamn water coolers off the 4th floor at Titan Tower because they were losing millions of dollars. And if Vince is losing money, things were not looking fucking bright for everybody else, and I didn't want to get stuck in that spot.
You had a lot of guys doing that, though, because I remember Tracy talking to me on the phone about that, about the potential investor. He never told me the amount of money. He just told me that he had someone. But Buddy Landell, same thing. He told me, like, I had someone who, but again, no amount was ever given to me, and knowing how much things cost, I don't know how legitimate it was. I mean, Warner had a guy that was going to pay $40,000.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is, and Tracy and Buddy sure didn't know a lot of women with $50,000. I'll just say that. But no, it wasn't like, okay, yes, then in that case we can kick the can down the road. And of course, if I had been able to have a time machine or the precognition abilities of Nostradamus and known that the Monday Night Wars and the Attitude Era and wrestling was going to get hot in 18 months or 20 months or whatever it was, it still would have been a while to wait. But it may have been different, but right then, as you look, I think, wasn't there a period of time in there in the mid-90s about that same time where WCW had just pretty much suspended house shows entirely and was just doing TV tapings? Yeah. Vince McMahon is pulling the water coolers out of the office at Titan Tower, and I still remember when he was cussing, when I got there in 96, he was still cussing that spring with, last year I lost $6 million out of my ass. So at that point in time, you're like, what the heck? This is not looking good to do this anymore. And so that's why I made that decision. But I felt the same way about Ruben's money as I do about the merchandise. I've made a deal, so I'm going to treat this like my own. Horner told a story. Somebody shoot interview, they sent me a clip. And fucking Horner told a story. Well, I went over to his house one time. Yeah, he went over to my house 2 or 3 times, unfortunately. And $20,000 in cash sitting on his coffee table. I said, ain't you going to go to the bank? He said, I will sometime. Good God. The only time we ever had $20,000 in cash in front of us was when we got his fucking friend at the bank in Morristown, old Buzzy. Buzz was the banker's name. To fucking get 20 grand for a TV angle, put it in a briefcase, come and show it on TV, and when he came in, nobody knew who was behind Smoky Mountain Wrestling, so all the fucking boys thought the banker from Morristown, Buzz, was the fucking money man, and were falling all over themselves to bring him a Coke and a chair and everything else. But that was the point. We were never at a point where we had a lot of resource finances to pick from. We were from 1 month to the next, which is why I was always somewhat on edge. Go ahead.
A few questions. One, I'm sure you've heard it, so many people have said it throughout the years, that if you had just held on a little bit longer, 96 is when the wrestling boom started. And everyone got lifted up because of that. And I'm curious if you think that's true, if it would have affected you that way. Like I said earlier, WCW and WWF eventually were gobbling up every bit of talent they can get their hands on. Paul was promising guys money, whether or not he knew he wasn't going to be able to pay for it, who knows. But do you think it's as simple as there was a wrestling boom, Smoky Mountain Wrestling would have had a boom too, or would you have had issues still, especially considering you would have had to find talent to get in there that wasn't going to immediately get signed? Because you weren't signing guys to contracts.
Right.
By WCW. What do you think would have happened if you had held on for another 6 months, let's say another year? Would you have gotten swept up in the wrestling boom, or would it have not affected you as much as everyone else?
Well, both. I remember when I was up in Connecticut, hearing reports of they were having outlaw shows in the old Eastern Kentucky Smoky Mountain area that were drawing 2,000 people with just hardly anybody on them, because all of a sudden wrestling was hot and everybody was paying attention. So I'm like, well, fuck, Newman, right? Couldn't happen 3 years ago. That's like, but that was the same thing Jerry Lawler said. The first time that the WWF in the 90s, when Lawler was doing Raw, ran Evansville, Indiana, they went to Roberts Stadium, the big building in town, and sold out. Six-figure house, like 10,000 people, whereas Evansville in the Memphis territory at the Coliseum, the old place, had been a Wednesday night stop for 20 years, and a good crowd in Evansville in any day was 1,000 people. As there's 10,000 people, and Lawler walks out on stage, they introduce him, getting ready to start Raw, and the people give him a standing ovation. He's playing the music, and he's standing there, and he's like, where were you motherfuckers when I ran this town every Wednesday night? So that's kind of the way I thought about that when I'd hear some things like the spot shows and etc. But we could have run mega events in Knoxville and Johnson City during the Attitude Era. And because we already had sold out the Knoxville Coliseum twice for our big summer shows, just bringing in a few WWF guys or a legend like Road Warrior Hawk or doing the Night of Love, whatever the case. That's one thing we were able to do is snag the people for the big events, the several events a year they had to see, the Bluegrass Brawl, whatever the case. But so if we'd had access to the WWF talent like we had in 94 and 95, in 98 and 99, well, you could have put some of those guys on the card and just automatically drawn a huge house because of their name and they're coming there in person. However, they weren't going to come run the territory or work the territory. You weren't going to have them on your spot shows. So it would have been feast and famine. It already kind of was. In that, in 1995, our spot shows, we ran 3 to 4 shows a week, but Knoxville was only once a month. Johnson City was only once a month. We ran Barberville, Kentucky once a month. It did very well there, but it was still a smaller town. I lost the Heavenly Bodies in 94 to the WWF brought them up, but at the same point, they'd already been there for a year and a half, or 2 years at that point. So they were starting to get old. I don't say old chronologically, but you know what I'm saying. They're not new to the people anymore. They've been there weekly on television. The Rock and Roll Express, they were so hot. They were still good, and how do you replace the rock and roll? But now they've been back together for 3 years on our weekly television. People are saying, well, why don't you replace them? Well, who was I going to replace those guys with? How do you replace the Rock and Roll Express? How do you replace the Heavenly Bodies at that level of a territory? You need somebody. I wasn't looking for guys that the big companies really wanted to sign. I wanted the guys that could work old-style Southern wrestling. But those guys were aging out, which is why I loved getting guys like Candido and young guys that, Al Snow, young guys that could get experience there and learn from those guys while they were still around and still in the ring.
But there's a good example. I mean, you had Al Snow for what, 6 months, 7 months, and he got gobbled up.
Yeah, but
I mean, both companies were after him. WCW was trying to get him when WWF signed him.
Yeah, but well, see, here's what I was going to say was, if I had continued to be in operation in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, because of the political affiliations, it would have been an earlier version of developmental than what they actually ended up having, because Vince had already agreed to send me talent to battle WCW, so that's where the side would have gone. So the guys already were encouraged to sign with WWE, or WWF then, and it would have been more formal, and I would have had guys, point I was going to make is I would have had guys for the big shows, but you can't run the whole territory and make an entire roster a living on just the big shows a few times a month. So I was running out of guys that weren't stale or could replace the talent that I had already had gotten over the previous years. 95, whether the guys were going to go to WWF or not, you have to change the talent, and I was running out of options available. So I don't think our talent was as good in 95 overall top to bottom. I don't think my booking was as good because I was starting to get burned. Had things thrown at us when people would, Eddie Gilbert,
5%.
Puerto Rico, some other guys, Vince would take, some other guys would send me back.
Your job is to discover the mystery dessert and then bake it.
I'm freaking out. 5 seconds, guys.
It looked like a dragon behind a trough.
Crime Scene Kitchen, produced tomorrow on Fox.
But to answer your overall question, yes, it would have benefited us in Boom, but then the problem would have become when they busted, might have very well have busted too. So it's a very interesting what if in that point. But yes, some of our shows would have benefited, and we could have had access to major talent to do big shows, but we couldn't have run a full-time territory. Even under those conditions, I don't think, unless we would have had a massive influx of a new investment to open up several more TV markets. Because as
That's
I
what I was
mentioned...
about to ask. That's what I was going to ask.
Okay, well, then go ahead and ask that.
If, let's just say hypothetically, like you just said, the big shows end up being bigger, maybe you could run them a little more frequently, maybe even these spot shows get picked up. Maybe you're able to double your audiences at the spot shows just because wrestling's hot, Smoky Mountain's getting more attention, Vince is helping you because you're running closer to WCW than anyone else.
A diamond
If you're
ball.
all of a sudden
What the
making
fuck
a
is that?
little bit more money, do you immediately go and say, how do I get into Chattanooga? How do I get into different towns in North Carolina? I mean, do you immediately go towards expanding the territory?
Well, no, because here's the thing. We got too big to be small, but we're still too small to be big. And do we go, if we finally got to a point where we were making some money doing what we were doing, then do we say, okay, now we're going to fucking spend all that money to go try to do it next door in Charleston, Huntington, West Virginia, and over in the Roanoke, and blah, 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 and start that process over again. As I said, without an influx of more
I forgot to grab it.
a legitimate
thank you.
investment rather than just, okay, here's some more, we're making money on what we're doing
ashtray
now. Because
and
that's,
my drink. And you can have
Knoxville had been closed for 3 years, since 1989.
have that Or fucking, you
So
could
there's
have
been
it.
no
The
live wrestling on a
Nutrageous bar.
television and major league scale. It had independent shows, obviously. We're talking about
Thank you.
territory, TV, etc. We go in, they've been dark for 3 years. We get the TV on in February of 92.
I'm streaming this
In 2
weird Pokemon
years,
like
actually, February of 94, from a brand new company, first time
Get it?
events to we see people in the Knoxville Civic
Ow.
Coliseum. Because we built the town. We got the people excited about it. They
That hurts.
got familiar with what we were doing. We went out and got sponsors. We advertised on the radio. The people
Did you just
were,
pull
the
a muscle?
wrestlers were
Yep.
sitting around town, whatever. Johnson
I've
City,
done that from
Tennessee,
coffee.
same
This one right
thing.
here, actually.
Yep, it's always that one.
They had
It's
no
yeah. Why?
territory wrestling.
It's because I'm fat. It's because I'm fat.
Southeastern had closed up. They
Okay.
had had
Hey, look,
some
oh,
WCW TV
finally.
tapings.
It
Well,
was
like
like
Knoxville and
spasm
Athens. It wasn't
cramping,
their
and I-
wrestling. So we
Unless
go
it
in
lets
with
go,
the
I
program,
just can't
and
do
I think the
anything because
first
it's like.
show in Johnson City.
Sorry about that, bro.
So what's your plan for the night?
Oh, I'm gonna be going back to that hellhole.
That hellhole, that's what I call work.
That's me home.
I seen Wanda yesterday. Was that her first day back?
You know,
I know she just had like a foot surgery or something.
I haven't been over there very much.
He doesn't live there. He lives at his mom's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. I been over there lately, and thing does not shut up. It's just, sometimes you want your peace.
Yeah.
And then his mom annoys the crap out of him 24/7.
No, she hasn't been lately, but
The day I was there, she was like pissing him off. I could see his blood boiling.
There's, like maybe one more. You want to try it?
faith it, and I has no faith no more. Thank you, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think I chose right because the first Pokemon I chose, or monster, was epic rarity.
Can you put that bag in the bag drawer?
Fuck no. Thanks, Caleb.
No problem. Oh, I didn't mean to kill that.
Working from anywhere means your cybersecurity could be coming from who knows where. Office Depot Office Max has an IT solution.
All right, we've got a potpourri of items to talk about that are going on in the professional wrestling world this week. And including that more names have been announced for the WWE Hall of Fame, the virtual ceremony this year, including last year's people. We've talked about this recently, but now there's more. Is this correct? There's more.
Yeah, they're adding a lot fast and furiously right before the Hall of Fame.
Fast and fierce.
We've talked in
Jesus.
the past about what the WWE Hall of Fame is and what it signifies and how it may be one thing to experts and one thing to the audience, but it means something to the people being inducted. And we are, 2 weeks in front of WrestleMania, and now they're just announcing everyone as fast as they can. It's like a dump of names in the last week and a half.
Well, and I mean, we're not watching the programming closely, but are they doing for each of these individuals what they normally do when they draw the announcements out a bit more, when they concentrate on one per show or one per week or whatever? Are they doing profile videos? Are they giving any context there? Or they do that, hey, here, he's going to come too?
Well, when you say we're not watching the programs closely, what you mean is we're not watching the programs. So I have no idea.
I didn't want to be rude. I didn't know if you'd heard. You've usually got your ear to the ground.
I think what they're doing is what they've done the last several years, which is kind of they take a name and they give it to one specific entity and let you break this name, and then we'll give this name to Sports Illustrated. We'll give this name to Rolling Stone.
You break this name. They've broken quite a few names.
Wow.
Well, the one that caught my eye that's being inducted into the prestigious Hall of Fame this year, of course, and how could you deny this man's incredible technical skills, his verbal ability, his long history of drawing main event, big box office houses, incredible string of pay-per-view appearances, show stealer in every aspect of the game. The great Khali, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
The great colleague.
Am I correct in assuming that now, in addition to the quotas that we already know that they've had over the past several years, where there has to be a person of color, a tag team, a deceased person, a female, their various cubby holes, that now they're appealing strictly to the YouTube audience in India? I mean, you've heard this, right? That apparently the massive part of their YouTube views comes from India for whatever reason. Do they not have television, or they don't have broadcast television? I don't know what they got going on in India, but they watch a lot of
India.
What do you know about this?
They do watch a lot of WWE. We believe that's one of the reasons why everyone from Impact Wrestling to WWE has made a concerted push into India, but it's also a great place for bots. You can potentially purchase to watch your videos. Not that we've ever done that or ever would, but I've heard that in the past about other wrestling entities.
They got great bot stores over there.
That's right.
Well, what do you think about the great Khali's qualifications, Brian, for going into the Hall of Fame? I mean, an incredible, awe-inspiring orator, the likes of which we haven't seen since Big Bad John. The incredible smoothness and agility that he displayed in his many classic wrestling appearances. I mean, I could go on, and I already have. They couldn't find any other Indian guy. Well, every time I had seen him, and I admit that it wasn't regularly, he could barely fucking walk. He's slow, dull-witted, plodding. He made goddamn Giant Silva look like fucking Andre.
He is a former world heavyweight champion.
So is fucking David Arquette and Shitstain.
And I think at the rate we're going, they may be in the Hall of Fame in the next several years. But I think, the other thing about Khali, and I was thinking about the other day, is although I don't think he was found to be responsible, I have to look this up while we're talking, but he's another wrestler in the Hall of Fame now that killed a guy.
Oh, that's right. When they were training him out in California, he tried to powerbomb somebody, and that didn't end well.
All Pro Wrestling. It was Roland Alexander. And there was a lawsuit. Again, that's why I said, I don't know if they sued him, but they sued AEW, I believe, at the time. And they were found to be responsible. They were reckless. But I don't remember if he was actually sued, but it was him.
No, well, and also, here's the thing. He was a student in the school. They found the school for responsibility, and having operated training programs, I know something about this. School for the responsibility, because how can you find one student responsible for injuring another student when they're doing what a school and instructors are telling them to do? That type of thing, I believe, is what. But the point is, yes, he's just so fucking giant and massive, he didn't mean to fucking hurt the guy. He's just a big fucking klutz. But the point is, what case are they making that this guy was any kind of legitimate Hall of Fame star, except the fact that we want a bunch of people in India to watch it on YouTube? What other case can you make? What great match can you point to? What great promo can you point to? What great box office accomplishment can you point to? What can you point to?
He was a star on their television show, and they got a kick out of him, and they're inducting him. I will say this, it is a little weird inducting people this year. I'm assuming there's going to be no one there. I mean, part of the kick, I mean, you were at an induction ceremony, although you weren't inducted, you gave a speech.
Yeah.
Part of the kick is that there are people there reacting. There are people there clapping and chanting and cheering, and it's kind of a, even though some of these people appear on TV again, it's kind of a end of the road. It's kind of a closing of the book. You're inducted into their Hall of Fame in front of the crowd, in front of your peers, and you get the reaction. It's a little different if it's just this kind of virtual Hall of Fame. I don't know how they're going to do this.
Well, and that's the thing, and some people say, well, don't they get enough glory or whatever? It's not even, it's making the speeches and the presentations and the overall entertainment value of the show more palatable when there are people there, especially fans and feedback. When you're just speaking into an empty room, you might as well be given a fucking financial, symposium or something. It's going to be dry to some extent, even possibly drier than empty arena wrestling matches, because there's no, like you said, there's no feedback, no emotion there. But
I am looking forward to Kali's speech.
no,
I'm dying to see what this will be.
who's going to induct him?
That's a good question. Who's going to induct him?
Who's the next worst wrestler in the world? Who can say, hey, here's the guy that took the heat off of me?
I was going to say you could have another giant do it. They just lost the Big Show.
No. Well, no, Vince wouldn't want them standing next to each other, because one of them would be taller, and that would screw the whole thing up.
I'm bored again.
Are you? Play something. What? No, well, you're already watching something.
Yeah. It's like Webby's got a song he just uploaded.
Who?
Webby.
Oh, shit.
Dude, his videos are weird but interesting.
See, I don't usually watch videos, It's weird. I know, I'm weird. I'm weird, nigga. I'm weird. Mouse electric. Jesus Christ.
You know what?
There's monster in here that's called Mouse Electric. Obvious ripoff. I mean, this is obvious a fucking a Flash or a fucking emulated thing of Pokemon. But I mean, I could, since I do have the full version of my boy, get any and all ROM hacks, but I mean, I played most of them all and beat them all, but they are fun. That's why I'm playing something I never played before. Now I'm gonna get bored of it soon.
Yeah, especially if you're playing it for hours.
With a lag, it kind of
Takes away the fun.
Well, yeah. also adds time to it because it's like 7 hours later.
Oh yeah.